We still don't know the full depth of Adolf Hitler's ambitions 75 years after the war ended. Many top-secret projects, some think, were stashed in subterranean tunnels across Europe as the tide of the battle turned against the Third Reich. The location and exact purpose of these projects are unknown. Ancient artifacts, like the imperial regalia of the Holy Roman Emperor, priceless artworks, and even fragments of stained glass windows from local cathedrals were hidden by the Nazis in a network of tunnels that were modeled like those found in medieval Europe. Some of the underground tunnels date back to the 14th century, when medieval laborers carved a maze of tunnels and vaults with hammers and chisels. Before we get into the secret tunnels of Adolf Hitler, here is a quick reminder that subscribing is free. Adolf Hitler was the head of the Nazi Party and the ruler of Germany from 1933 to 1945. In September 1939, his invasion of Poland sparked World War II. For 6 years, the horrific battle raged, consuming nearly the whole world. After the Second World War and the Allied powers' triumph, it was assumed that Hitler had larger intentions that were never discovered. Hitler's covert tunnels, probes into the Nazi nuclear weapons program, as well as other secret programs like mystical practices and horrifying human experimentation. With the Allied destruction of the German rocket program's headquarters, the Führer would have learned the need of relocating secret programs to secure places. As a result, the Nazis constructed a massive network of underground tunnels that crossed Germany, Austria, Poland, France, and Czechoslovakia. The majority of these underground networks have been blocked or booby-trapped, while some remain unexplored. In 1943, Hitler and his engineers began constructing an extensive subterranean metropolis, the Projekt Riese, linked by tunnels to 7 bunker complexes where they could carry out their war preparations unhindered by Allied bombers or advancing Red Army forces. Hitler gave the go-ahead in April 1943. He assigned the project to Armaments Minister Albert Speer. In September of that year, Speer started negotiations on the project with the recently established Silesian Industrial Company to bring it to fruition. The Nazis abandoned the project 18 months later, having been crushed by the onrushing Soviets. None of the 7 shelters and tunnel systems were finished, and they are still in varying stages of disrepair today. It is believed that if the Germans had continued the war effort for another 18 months, they would have finished this underground metropolis. But war does not wait. Projekt Riese is a huge underground tunnel system located 80 kilometers south of Wrocław, beneath the Owl Mountains, Poland's oldest mountain range. To ensure that the walls lasted the test of time, the Nazis strengthened them with steel and concrete. It was projected that approximately 2 million cubic meters of granite would need to be blasted out of the Owl Mountains to finish the construction of this enormous underground settlement. Unfortunately, they were unable to complete the reinforcing project because Nazi forces abandoned it during the last days of the war. In German, Riese signifies huge. Even by Hitler's megalomaniacal standards, this was a huge project. 7 subterranean facilities linked by tunnels totaling over 5.5 miles in length beneath the Owl Mountains of Lower Silesia and the sumptuous Kisiez Castle in what was then Germany and is now a region of Poland. Projekt Riese, which was built between 1943 and 1945 during World War II, is regarded as one of the world's greatest military projects today. It is still unknown why the Nazis constructed this underground facility, nor is its actual size known. Some believe the underground complex was intended to be used as a weapon manufacturing plant, while others claim it was intended to be Adolf Hitler's headquarters. According to historians, the Germans were hoping for a haven that could survive their rivals' escalating onslaught and Allied airstrikes. The Owl Mountains satisfied all standards after a careful study of several places. The mountain range was deemed the safest location because of its strong rock, which provides the underground tube with much-needed protection against airstrikes. However, it slowed the construction process significantly. Prisoners from Poland and the Soviet Union were brought in to finish the building work. The labor conditions were horrible. Many captives succumbed as a result of malnutrition, deplorable living conditions, and weariness. The vast majority were afflicted with unknown illnesses. Approximately 5,000 forced workers were killed while the construction project was underway. According to historians, around 13,000 forced laborers and convicts from adjacent concentration camps, such as Auschwitz, were put to work erecting the surface structures and excavating the mountain at Osovka. It is claimed that 5,000 people died in making the project reality, and 14 were executed following failed escape attempts. The average life expectancy for a cave worker was roughly 4 months, owing primarily to sickness, hunger, and perilous labor. Children as young as 10 are claimed to have been forced to push mining carts and perform other menial tasks. The enormity of Nazi megalomania and the cost of human lives is devastating. Even while the tunnel remains a mystery to many, it is recognized for a few things. Project Riese has almost 90,000 cubic meters of dug tunnels and can be reached by 7 distinct entrance sites, or the complex bunkers found at Walim Rzeczka, Jugowice, Bodars, Sobo, now called Ramenberg, Sokolets, Osovka, and Ksi Castle. Complex Vlodars has the most tunnels drilled under it of all the tunnels. Few have a concrete finish, but the majority have been abandoned in their natural form. The goal was to turn Osovka into a metropolis capable of housing more than 20,000 Nazi troops and laborers. A visit to Owl Mountain could enlighten people about the atrocities that occurred there, as well as life in general during the Second World War. There is evidence of unfinished military buildings, stores, bunkers, building materials, and excavated stuff inside the hilly tunnel. There are a few tunnel entrances as well, many of which are inaccessible owing to the hardened brick used to build a barrier, and some of which are flooded. Some tunnels have no end in sight, leading to nowhere. Aside from these main compounds, a casual walk through the mountains will reveal numerous and somewhat terrifying traces of abandoned military barracks, bunkers, warehouses, building materials, excavated matter, and tunnel openings, many of which are barricaded, bricked, or blocked by hardened cement bags. Others are filled with water, and some appear to go on forever, leading to nowhere. To the tourists' good fortune, there are some tunnels and facilities that are open to them. Xias, with Castle Fürstenstein, which was meant to be Adolf Hitler's house, is one of the underground complex's most notable features. Only 2 underground tunnels connecting to the majestic building cellars were planned to go to the castle. So what exactly have the researchers discovered up till now about the tunnels? Excavating 7 underground locations is a difficult task. In reality, just 100,000 cubic meters of Project Risa's 213,000 cubic meters volume have been discovered thus far. Some of what was discovered has been left accessible to the public for visiting by travelers at Walimirzycka, Wodars, and Osowka. Archaeologists discovered an abandoned painted gate that was designed to fool passerbys, a pistol, and a massive hall with a construction track, among other things. An ancient winch, ammunition wagons, a paint inscription that reads Riza, solid arches, barracks, and other ruins in a basement were also scattered around the tunnels. Because of lack of documentation, Project Risa's objective remains unknown. In their post-war memoirs, Albert Speer and others argued that the purpose of Project Risa was to serve as a general hiding spot for the Nazi senior commanders, as well as a vast underground headquarters for Adolf Hitler. Other experts, however, believe that how this information was purposely distributed by historically untrustworthy sources is proof that this was a planned Nazi deception effort aimed to distract attention from the true objective of Project Risa. Or was it supposed to be a superhuge subterranean military facility for nuclear testing, hypersonic planes, anti-gravity devices, and other wonder weapons such as the Nazi Bell? Some people believe that the enormous subterranean facility that Project Risa planned to construct would have been an ideal location for the Nazis to carry out their never-ending and infamous military experiments to make superhumans. Well, there are many theories by historians like nuclear testing. It would be a safer place to conduct them since the Owl Mountain's almost impermeable granite would prevent any detectable emissions. Intricate tunnel systems might have been utilized to shift munitions, offices, and records in the face of an onslaught of Allied bombs. According to one theory, Project Risa was intended to establish an underground facility for the fabrication of V-1 and V-2 rockets. The V-1 and V-2 rockets were long-range weapons capable of traveling at the speed of sound. They were nicknamed revenge weapons because they were utilized by Germany to hurt Allied soldiers and destroy their morale. Others believe that conducting the Nazis' anti-gravity experiments deep beneath man-made caverns would have been far safer. According to unverified stories, the Nazis were looking for uranium resources buried deep inside the Owl Mountains. Then there was Die Glocke, also known as the Nazi Bell, one of the many wonder weapons that the Germans were constructing in secret. It was planned to be 12 feet tall and 7 feet across, with counter-rotating cylinders filled with a mercury-like fluid, violet in color. According to reports, 5 of the 7 scientists who worked on this research died of unknown reasons. It has also been said that the underground complex was used to hide riches that had been stolen from banks, museums, and archives. The artwork that was plundered by German soldiers from all of the European nations that they occupied, the gold from Breslau, and the treasures of the Silesian noble family von Schaffgotsch are some of the gems that have been stolen. Since its collapse during the dying gasps of the Third Reich, the gloomy tunnels of Project Risa have spurred endless tales about the claimed treasures concealed beneath. Among these reportedly priceless items are train carriages that were said to be laden with Nazi wealth, but whose whereabouts have remained a mystery ever since World War II ended. Pieces of art that the Nazis had seized from the many countries that they invaded. The storied Amber Room from St. Petersburg in Russia was disassembled and then reassembled in its original state in a massive viewing room located beneath the Owl Mountain. 3 of the 7 tunnel systems that were planned to be built as part of Project Riese have been deemed unfit for tourism due to their unsafe conditions. In addition to Xia's castle, tours are available at 3 of the other castles, and some of these other castles even have modest gift stores on site. The curators of the Osovka tunnel system offered 2 types of tours: a standard walking tour and an extreme tour. The extreme tour involves being carried around flooded tunnels in a big metal tub while carrying a torch and praying that your iPhone doesn't fall into the icy water. Adolf Hitler started off as an ordinary artist, but he eventually climbed to power and became Germany's dictator and the architect of the Holocaust. Given the devastation left in Hitler's wake, a major question for historians of the 20th century has been how Hitler captured the German imagination and came to power. It'll surprise many, and some won't even believe, but every stage of Hitler's ascent to power was democratically and legally. Born in Austria, but loyal to the Weimar Republic, Hitler served for 4 years in the German army during World War I. In 1918, a month before Germany officially surrendered on November 10th, he was blinded and left momentarily mute by a mustard gas assault. Hitler's outrage over Germany's loss and the Treaty of Versailles, which placed blame for World War I on Germany, inspired him to pursue a life in politics, and also as a spy by the army because of influenced personality. After being tasked in June 1919 by the German army with gathering intelligence on the German Workers' Party, also known as the DAP, Adolf Hitler eventually became a member of that organization in September 1919. He respected the party's opposition to the new Weimar Republic, the Treaty of Versailles, and treated Jews in Germany the same as everyone else. Hitler rose to prominence within the party quite quickly and became one of its most renowned speakers. On February 24, 1920, Hitler presided over a political gathering that had almost 2,000 attendees to announce the Nationalist 25-point program, or the National Socialist Program. He also officially renamed the party the Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, which translates to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, or for short, Nazi Party. Hitler started giving speeches at Munich beer halls to contact and recruit more people. All of Bavaria knew of him thanks to his excellent eloquence and propaganda. His persuasive speaking and propaganda skills made sure his name was known throughout all of Bavaria. Concerned about the potential of the Worker' Party combining with the German Socialist Party, Hitler made a threat to resign from the party. So they decided not to unite with the opposition party and instead appointed Hitler party chairman, since he was the most well-known and influential man at the time. Under his leadership, the NSDAP was used as a brutal fighting force against other German political organizations. Hitler formed the Assault Division, which became known as the Sturmabteilung or the Brown Shirts. In 1922, Adolf Hitler founded 3 of his most important organizations: the Hitler Youth, the Jungenbund der NSDA, aka the Hitler Youth, and the Staff Guard, or for short, the SS. At party rallies, he maintained his narrative of hatred for Jews and support for the triumph of the Aryan race. Hitler praised Benito Mussolini's fascist coup in Italy that October. Munich served as the location for the inaugural Reichsparteitag, often known as the Nuremberg Rally, which took place in January 1923. In the latter part of the year, in November 1923, Hitler attempted his own coup during the beer hall putsch, with 2,000 Nazis marching on the city center. It failed with 18 deaths, including 16 Nazis and 4 police officers. Hitler was eventually apprehended for high treason 2 days later, but instead of rejection, his name rose to the national level. During the trial in 1924, Hitler was found guilty and was thrown into jail for 5 years. During his time in jail, he wrote Mein Kampf, which roughly translates to My Struggle, which was a manifesto of Nazi propaganda and anti-Semitism. Even though the Nazi Party was outlawed in Bavaria after the Beer Hall Putsch, it was successful in winning a few seats in the German federal elections in May and December. And after completing barely 9 months of his term, Hitler was freed from prison. The Beer Hall Putsch's failure and Mussolini's influence led Hitler to pursue democratic options of taking power. After the publication of Mein Kampf in July 1925, Hitler became a household name among European fascists. Hitler created the SS independently of the SA. In 1924, he also legally discarded his Austrian citizenship. But Paul von Hindenburg won the election and became the president of Germany. But still, a good thing happened for Hitler. Joseph Goebbels, a popular politician at the time, joined the Nazi Party after reading Mein Kampf. Outside of Bavaria and across Germany, Hitler and the Nazi Party were making strides toward gaining public acceptance. As the mid-1920s progressed, the party entered mainstream politics with the help of anti-Semitic propaganda. They were successful in winning votes and seats in every election for the federal government. The Nazi Party did better in federal elections than it had in the past, although they still only garnered 2.6% of the vote in 1928. By year's end, however, the Nazi Party had grown to almost 130,000 members. Erich Ludendorff, the Nazi Party's presidential candidate, received 1.1% of the vote in a run for office. On October 29, 1929, there was a catastrophic meltdown on the New York Stock Exchange that sent shockwaves across the global financial system and in German politics. Many Germans found themselves out of work and struggling financially. A month later, Germans went to the polls for a referendum. It rejected the terms of the Treaty of Versailles and forbade government officials in Germany from making payments on the country's World War I obligations. Despite the referendum's failure, the Nazi Party gained significant credibility and patriotic sympathy. Street violence caused by the Nazis and fueled by Goebbels' propaganda increased in 1930. The Nazi Party secured 107 seats in the federal election that took place in September. The results of the election virtually shut down the more moderate parties in Germany, including the Communists. The Nazis had grown to become Germany's biggest opposition party. By invoking Article 48 of the German Constitution, the Chancellor of Germany at the time, Heinrich Brüning, aimed to ease the financial strain that was being placed on Germany. Because of this, the president was able to pass policies without the approval of parliament. To oppose Chancellor Brüning's liberal policies, Hitler joined the conservative Harzburg Front. It was an anti-democratic attempt to establish a unified front against Germany's moderate government. The Nazis, on the other hand, had no interest in working with anybody else because they wanted Hitler to have absolute power. There were now more than 800,000 people in the Nazi Party. In the presidential election held in March 1932, Hitler lost to President Hindenburg despite receiving more than 36% of the vote. To counter Hitler's rise to power, President Hindenburg replaced Chancellor Brüning with Franz von Papen in May. In July of 1932, the Nazis received almost 37% of the public vote. As the biggest party in the Reichstag, they elected Hermann Göring as president. Hitler had previously requested the office of the Chancellor and had rejected Chancellor Papen's offer of Vice-Chancellor. While the Nazis' vote share dropped on November, 19 influential representatives of Germany's business community nonetheless signed the Industriellen-Eingabe, calling on President Hindenburg to appoint Hitler Chancellor. But Major General Kurt von Schleicher, an adversary of Hitler's, succeeded Chancellor Papen in December. With Hitler's help, Papen convinced Hindenburg to appoint Hitler Chancellor in exchange for Hitler naming him his Vice Chancellor. By 1933, Hitler and the Nazi Party would benefit from the political maneuverings he had undertaken before. Hitler's rise to power coincided with the Great Depression, and millions of unemployed Germans clung to his promises of economic recovery. With Papen's help and Hindenburg's approval, Hitler became Chancellor in January 1933, marking the beginning of his seizure of power. Fear was sparked not just in the democracies that are the region's neighbors, but also among the Jewish community when his nomination was announced. A few years later, Hitler would lead Germany into World War II, which would be the final test of his authority, as well as the might of mankind itself. In March of 1933, as a result of the Enabling Act, Hitler was granted plenary powers. These powers allowed him to act without being constrained by the parliament or the German constitution. Hitler used these powers to set up the Third Reich. When Adolf Hitler attained a position of dictatorship, one of his first acts was to remove civil rights and possibilities for resistance. In July, it became illegal to hold or participate in political parties that were not Nazi parties. 3 months later, Germany announced that it would no longer participate in the League of Nations or the World Disarmament Conference. During the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler gave orders to the SS to execute a number of political rivals and opponents, including the execution of leaders of the SA who were opposing Hitler's control. As Hitler had plenary powers, he was able to order the executions even if the courts did not provide their approval. Between the 30th of June and the 2nd of July of 1934, there were over 150 executions, and hundreds more were detained. Because of Hitler's actions, Vice Chancellor Papen stepped down from his position on July 3rd. A month after that, President Hindenburg passed away. The day before his death, the cabinet approved a bill to do away with the position of president, and all of the president's responsibilities were given to Chancellor Adolf Hitler. Thus, Hitler was elevated to the position of Führer und Reichskanzler and became dictator of Germany. Soldiers in the German army were required to take the Hitler Oath, in which they pledged their devotion and obedience not to the state, but to Hitler. As Führer, he proceeded to cut off political and economic ties between Germany and the rest of the world. He violated the terms of the Treaty of Versailles by arming Germany again, and in 1938, he started expanding Germany's frontiers by annexing Austria. By the time 1941 had rolled around, Hitler's army had already invaded the Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Denmark, Norway, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, France, Yugoslavia, and Greece. All of these countries belong to the European continent. Along with Japan's assault on the United States, his siege of Britain and the Soviet Union dragged almost every country in the world into the conflict in some way to start World War II. Over 40,000 concentration camps and slums were built by Nazi Germany under Hitler's instruction to confine, enslave, and kill people. Jews from Germany and other invaded nations made up most of these captives, along with political opponents, homosexuals, Romani, and other nationalities from throughout the world. In the end, Hitler's desire for power was responsible for the deaths of 75 million people before he committed suicide in 1945. The results of Adolf Hitler's rule were catastrophic and devastating to every community in the world. But if you look at his rise, he would never have been able to rise without the support of his followers and political friends. The 20 years leading up to World War II are a historical example that highlights the dangers that might arise if fascism is allowed to make inroads into democracies.